statistical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the SNL Network's By The Numbers show. This is one of my favorite shows that we get to do on the SNL Network because we get to dive in and break down the SNL stats, which is really how we started this whole thing about a year and a half ago. So I cannot wait to do this every single time we get a break between SNL episodes with my man, Mike Murray. So Mike, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year. I'm a little thrown off. You didn't say, yes, that is right when the show started. We have to start it all over.
Yes, that is right. Switch it
Thank
up
you.
a little bit. Yes, I got it for you. Anyways, Mike, how are you? How are your holidays?
Great. Low key chill. It's like a nine degrees here in Boston.
Okay.
How's it up for you?
That's not true.
Well, we do things in Celsius up here in Canada, so things are very
Oh,
cold
yeah.
here. Yeah,
Whoa.
we're in the minuses. Yeah. This is very
I'll
very
convert.
cold.
That doesn't feel right. I think you might have to fact check that, John. That can't be true.
Once upon a time, we used to do things in Fahrenheit, but then somebody came around and changed it all. But anyways, yes, it's very cold, but at least that's the one thing that you can do from home. You can podcast from home, which is nice, and that's why I'm glad I have this job. And then joining us also on the By the Numbers show, and she's been a great part of this show, is Nicole Rovine. Nicole, how are you?
I'm great. I love the By the Numbers show. It's such a nice in between series of episodes thing that we do, and it's a nice kind of catch up. We think about what happened and how it's going to inform what is about to happen in the season. So it always makes me so happy, and I'm great. I had a really good holiday. I'm excited for 2022. Other than the fact that it sounds like 2020 as well, that is tripping me up a little bit emotionally. It's like I can't quite say it out loud. But otherwise, every time I say 2022, I have a really good feeling about it. Every time I hear that in my head ringing, and I'm like, let's slow it down. But I do have a great feeling, and the year's going to be great. So I'm feeling good.
This year definitely feels like 2022. So it's crazy so far, but we're very early on. So we'll see what's going to happen. And joining us as well on the By the Numbers show is Andy Hoglund from SNLinReview. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I got my my Christmas present right here. This is Uncle Nearest whiskey, 1856. And I'm drinking it in solidarity with my man, Bob Saget, who is no longer with us, but was such a big part of my childhood. So it's, former SNL host. And I'd like to dedicate my appearance on this show tonight to him.
Yes. Oh, that's really, really nice. Yeah, I do want a quick word on Bob Saget before we get going, and just to say that obviously in terms of his SNL career, I mean, he hosted during one of the weirdest seasons of Saturday Night Live. This was season 20 of the show, and it was just a transition year for a lot. But ultimately he's known for being like a fixture in the comedy world, just in so many like great things on his resume.
True gentleman.
Yeah, for sure. And like Full House was like a huge part of my childhood, and my sister, it was her favorite show. So that was really rough. So
and
rough to hear it.
Director of Dirty Work.
Yeah, Dirty Work. We got to
Dirty Work.
Out.
So I know I got
Half Baked.
I got a fellow Norm stan with me with Andy, so I have to give a shout out to Dirty Work.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And just like it's back to back with Betty White and Bob Saget. So
how did Artie Long outlive Norm and Bob Saget, by the way? What the fuck is up with that? Like, come on now, universe.
Yeah. Family show, Andy. Family show. So.
Oh, sorry guys. You can edit this out. Oh wait, we're live. Fuck.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh.
Artie Lang also outlived Rickles. Come on.
That's true. All right, let's stop counting people's lives and let's start getting into the SL stuff. Before we do, I just want to say, Andy, you and I talk a lot off of the podcast, but we haven't heard from you on the podcast since I think the Kim Kardashian week. So I know you write your articles every single week for Entertainment Weekly. Like, how are you enjoying the SNL season so far? And give us the update on your life.
Things are good, man. I've been enjoying the season for the most part. I mean, I'm not super on Team Kate returning. I think that it's upsetting the flow a little bit. But as is COVID, so there's some things in life that you just can't change. As Nicole said, it's 2022, all over again. But staying busy, trying to keep it loose. As folks know, John and I continue to support Jeff Richards on his podcast. So definitely want to give Jeff a shout out there. and Siobhan Fallon Hogan as well. I helped her out on a few things today. Folks can find her latest podcast appearance on women.com, their Instagram live takeover. She did that earlier today. And then also Forbes has a good Q&A with her about her career and her latest projects as well too. So besides just plugging my own stuff, wanted to plug Jeff and Siobhan's projects too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and you may actually be hearing from some of those people coming up soon. We have something special planned down the road in January, so TBD on that. But yeah, Andy, really great to hear from you. And you made mention of it, which was that when we last spoke on the By the Numbers show, this was before the Billie Eilish episode. This was before the Paul Rudd episode. And here were the two things that happened. Number one, Kate McKinnon returned, and that was the major storyline of the Billie Eilish episode. It obviously changed in terms of numbers. I mean, really, it was like Cecily Strong out, Kate McKinnon in. And then for the Paul Rudd episode, we were wondering, what are we going to get for the Christmas show? And obviously COVID had a major impact on that show. So as far as the numbers are concerned, huge outliers there. So, the first thing that we always do on these By the Numbers shows is we get into the power rankings. So before I bring them up, Mike, do you want to introduce, things that we should look out for when we look at these power rankings compared to the last time we were on the show?
I think you just said them. I mean, we're going to look at this point last year at season 46, and you're going to see 80 and Cecily real low. And then because they were out, 80 missed 7 episodes. Now Kate missed 7 episodes. You're going to see Kate real low this season. But did you want me to explain the rankings?
No, let me bring those up for you. I just didn't know if you
yeah.
had any other major points that you wanted to bring up before we do, but I'll bring those up for everybody over here. So let me do that. Okay. All right, on screen. There we go. Let me know if everybody has that. Cool. All right, great. So we have our rankings here. I'm going to zoom in so we can get to our latest rankings. So just give me one moment. Sorry, everybody, we're doing this live, so I just want to make sure that I can do this properly for all of you. Okay, hold on. Let's get to our mid-season power rankings. Is that better for everybody? Okay. Perfect. Let's start at the top of the rankings. So leading the rankings for this part, for the first half of season 47, we have Kenan Thompson at 87.47. Cecily Strong comes in at number 2, 74.3. Colin Jost coming in at number 3 at 66.06. Ego Wodem at 63.5 comes in 4th place. Adi Bryant is in 5th with 61.4. Mikey Day is at 55.6. We have Heidi Gardner at 53.2. JAJ, the rookie of the year so far, at 52.48. Pete Davidson at 52.36. We have Michael Che at 51.23 and Kyle Mooney at 50.94. So, those are the top really half or a little bit more than half of the rankings. Let's talk about the top of the rankings so far. Mike, anything that stands out to you here?
Sure. And real quick, this is all just one number that combines screen time and appearances. So if you're wondering what the number is, it's just averaging those two together in a big math problem. So that's what those numbers are. But I think it just, I hate to make this comparison, but John, I think you'll indulge me. People talk about Tom Brady, right? He's been there forever and he won't go away. Well, Kenan Thompson dominating at the top of season 47. He came in, how many years ago? Since 2003, and he's the number 1 cast member. So we can't just gloss by Kenan Thompson, who's at the top of the charts. I'll go back years and he's at the top of the charts then too. So Kenan at number 1 with a sizable lead, 13 points above Cecily, who's at 2. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but he was one of 2 cast members who was present for the Paul Rudd episode, live in studio when they recorded their intros and such. So there's Kenan right there. And then I'll just shout out to Adi Bryant, who I think has really I think she's taken a step forward. I don't know. I think she's just more consistent and has been kind of floating in that range right there, where I think we missed her last year. And Andy made reference to Kate being back, which I think I agree with him on that. But I actually was pleasantly surprised to see Adi and Cecily back once the season started. I kind of was hoping that maybe we'd have a changing of the guard this year, but when they came back, I was like, maybe there's something in the tank for AD and Cecily, and I definitely was happy to see them more this season.
Yeah. So, Mike, I do want to ask you before I head to the others for their thoughts on the top of the charts. You had made you made mention about the comparisons between 47 and 46, and we're going to be doing that a lot tonight. But what I want to know is that Cecily Strong obviously was not there for episode 8 of this year. Last year, we were giving exceptions to the rules for some people who were gone, to film things, due to unprecedented times we were living in. Is that anything that's going to be happening in season 47, or because Cecily wasn't there, it still counts? She gets zeros across the board.
I made it just across the board. If you get a 0, you get a 0, because last year we were, starting this thing up, and we knew going in that, that was going to happen. This year we knew Kate was not going to be there. We don't know how long, but so I did go back for the comparison of these two. And so it'll reflect the zeros that Cecily and 80 put up for 46. So this is like a true metric of average of their score over 9 episodes in 46 versus 47.
Okay, great. All right, Andy, this is your first look at the top of the rankings for this season so far. Anything stand out to you here from any of the cast members that are, above average in terms of power rankings so far this season?
Well, numbers don't lie, right? So who am I? I'm just one man, but as someone who watches SNL 11:30 on Saturday nights, it doesn't feel like Keenan should be number 1, and certainly not number 1 by 13 points. It doesn't really feel with the show that I've been watching this season. He definitely has his established role, and Mike brings up an excellent point about the Paul Rudd episode, which arguably maybe shouldn't even be counted, right? Just such a weird nothing of an episode, right? And then you look at, like, to me, if I think about this season, if I'm closing my eyes, in my mind's eye, like, who's the Mac Jones of this cast, right? To extend the metaphor a little bit, Mike, the Mac Jones is JAJ, and to see him statistically tied with Pete, it's surprising. I suppose that's the word. It's surprising.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Mac Jones, quarterback for the New England Patriots, for anybody who is not a sports fan, and it was rookie. Yeah, Nicole raising her hand.
Google it, guys. Google it. Step outside.
Yes, is the rookie of the year. So basically, yeah, I mean, that is for sure. It's definitely something that stands out when you look at this. Nicole, what are your thoughts when you see the top of the rankings here?
I'm surprised. I mean, I think Keenan definitely jumped up with the Paul Rudd episode because of the way that was structured and all that stuff. But even without it, he's been at the top, and it's interesting because we've had a lot of conversations about different cast members who are low on rankings and on screen time and all these different metrics that we use. But then when they're on screen, they are really powerful, or they do a big moment. Like Bowen Yang is someone who people are usually surprised that they would think he has more screen time than he does. And it's because every time he's on screen, he really makes an impact. And it's something that is a little bit more, I think he has more maybe A roles. We could talk about that. Whereas with Keenan, he fits in so well, and he can be under the radar. He can just be, anytime you put Keenan in, it's this effect that we all talk about, like the Keenan effect. You can just like put him in something and it's better, or it's cleaner, or it has a better ending to it, it's sharper. So it's kind of surprising and not that he's all the way at the top like that, because I don't think he's had so many standout moments. But then of course, when I think about a lot of my favorite moments of the season, he was there. And he was bolstering it and making everyone around him look better, which is a great quality and in someone to have around for the longest cast member of all time. It's good that one of his best qualities is that he makes the people around him look better. So it's surprising, but it's I think it just shows that there are so many different ways to excel on this show. And if you want to be the longest standing cast member of all time, the way to excel is to be at the top of these types of charts and have everyone be kind of a little surprised about it, because they're like, I don't remember you that as much as this would seem to be. But it's just that you are always there helping everybody else around you to look a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that just a clarifier for all of the listeners who are, would ask about this, the Paul Rudd episode definitely counts as part of the rankings. Like, we're taking that into account. We did discuss it at the time. It's not like one of these situations where, February rolls around and then it's the 40th anniversary and it's like, oh, does this count as part of the 40th season? No, that's not what this is. This is an actual, episode. The encore presentations, the content that was previously done. Mike, I mean, we're not counting, Justin Timberlake and Andy Samberg's Dick in a Box in the power rankings for season 47, but the intros to the content do count as part of the power rankings for the season.
Mike, are we able to deduce how much that Paul Rudd episode boosted Keenan's ranking over Cecily?
2.2. So Keenan, if you did not count episode 9, would be an 85.2.
So still pretty substantial lead.
So yeah, he was already up there. That's why I let off with Keenan for that reason, because I figured we'd go right away to Keenan probably got a big bump, but we also had, we had 3 pre-tapes. We had a cold open sort of segment with Tina Fey and had those intros that John mentioned. So yeah, Keenan was at top of the pack. Cecily also missed basically the entire Billie Eilish episode, so she dropped twice in a row,
Right.
episode 8 and 9. She appeared in the cold open as Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then was absent the rest of the episode. So Keenan was at an 85.2, and now he's at like an 87.5. So he went up like 2.3 points from that week to the next.
You know who the real loser here is quietly is Kyle Mooney and whoever's to Kyle's right, because that Paul Rudd episode gave Michael Che. That slight statistical edge just to bump him up. Who's next to Kyle Mooney on the other side there? John?
All right, well, it's a good transition point. So let's get to the bottom half of our rankings, and we'll take a look over here as we start to get towards the under average point of the season. And under
Alex
average,
Moffat. Moffat's always
average.
losing.
Exactly. Average for the power rankings for the first half of the season is at a 47.29. So just over the average in, I believe it's 12th place, is Alex Moffat. So 49.6. Then we have Chris Redd coming in at 44.56. Dismukes is at 42.15. Bowen Yang is at 34.89. Chloe Fineman at 33.28. Melissa at 28.08. Punky at 27.4. Kate McKinnon coming in at 23.65. This is her first entry into the rankings this season. Then we have Sarah Sherman at 22.91 and Aristotle at 17.9. So, Mike, this goes to an interesting stat that you brought up a lot after the Billie Eilish episode, which was Kate McKinnon coming in and then beating out 2 of our cast members for screen time so far this season.
So she beat out Sarah and Aristotle, 2 of the rookies on average. So took Kate's score from the Billie Eilish episode, which she was heavily in, and then the Paul Rudd episode, which she was in the Home Goods pre-tape. So that's the only Kate content we have in season 47, and those 2 alone, averaged over 9 episodes, puts her above 2 of the rookies. But as far as screen time, just a volume stat, she's ahead of Chloe, Melissa, Punky, Sarah, and Aristotle. So they a couple of episodes they missed, but they've been present for all 9. Maybe not the last, but Kate has amassed more screen time in the Billie Eilish episode alone than those bottom 3, and then passed Melissa and Chloe just from one more appearance in the Paul Rudd episode. So that one is pretty crazy, because if you ever want to hear a Kate impact stat, that's pretty much the top shelf one.
Yeah, it's crazy. Nicole, any thoughts on the bottom of the rankings here that you see that you want to make sure we bring up?
I mean, I was thinking of the Bowen storyline is like, most people that I talk to, and granted, most people that I talk to about the show are like, Bowen is like in their top 3 cast members for sure, top 3 or 5. But I think it's whether you're a fan or you're not as much of a fan of him, I think most people would think he had more, because he really is so impactful every time he's on the screen, and you never forget when he's on. So it's just, we talk about, I think we're all such big numbers people here, and it's cool to have the conversations in tandem of like having your impact when you're on screen, and then when push comes to shove and we're looking at these numbers, like it actually, I think, reflects really well for someone to be low in our number system when they're having a good season. because then people are like, oh, whoa, like, yeah, I was about to curse, but we're done with that. Oh, like that person,
Leave that to
like,
Andy.
I think it's like, it looks really good for you to be, quote unquote, low on the list, and to be having a great season and to be so memorable, because it's like, then people, it has that underdog effect. People are like, oh my gosh, we're not getting nearly enough of this person. They're having a killer season and they're bottom half, like, not cool. So I think it's like, it puts that kind of oomph into people's subconscious about people. So I like that. Also, Bowen and Chloe, it's cool to see them at this point together. Like, they started together, and I think their storylines from a data perspective have been pretty similar on the whole. A few differences, but I think they've just following their trajectories together has been pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Andy, what about you? Anyone at the bottom of the rankings that you are surprised that's there?
I mean, look, like, I think, you have to kind of see like the forest through the trees a little bit here, and, you can kind of parse out these numbers for this or that reason and what they say. But, it's kind of like, if you take a step back, so many people are just scratching for every inch here, and Kate is swooping in and, outdoing like a quarter of the cast with one episode, just like ridiculous things like that. And it's almost like you look at all the different cast members here and all the different demographics and fandoms that they represent. And this is a show that it's almost like, like it's not like the sum of the parts, like it doesn't even matter if the show like works or not. What matters is like we have these individual fan bases that are supporting, like, oh, like Nicole was just saying, oh, I'm Team Bowen, or Team Kate. Like we see it on SNL Twitter all the time. So I think, if there's like an overall purpose to all this, you take a step back, that's the story of these numbers, is that this is a show that has way too many cast members, like enough that people are just like fledgling. Seriously. Like it's almost like, why, like, Melissa, why are you on the show? Well, it's like, well, because people love Melissa and they love rooting for the underdog, and that's her persona. I just watched her Netflix thing a couple hours ago, So that's like the one thing that kind of like really stands out to me, just looking at the variety of cast members, their different skill sets. And, they get like one sketch a week, if that. And even then is enough to like kind of sustain their place on the show, which I don't think was historically always the case. Like someone like Laura Keitlinger, had, one update appearance every 3 episodes. She was done at the end of the year, and you really don't see that besides like Lauren Holt or, Luke Null. That's really not the case anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think that that's what's happening here, at least. I mean, we've seen one of the themes of the first half of the season is that we've seen SNL taking chances on a lot of the new people. So I do think like we'll see as it goes. I think this is, what we've seen from Sarah and Aristotle, JAJ being the exception, I think is like what you would expect to happen for the cast members to
yes, but at the same time, look at Bowen, look at Chloe, like look at all these other people. It's like a balloon, John. You squeeze one half, you give the shine to Sarah and Aristotle, or JAJ or whoever, and then all these other like mid-tier cast members who aren't Cecily or Keenan or Kate. Then all of a sudden, those people get lost in the shuffle. Heidi Gardner, that's the story of Heidi Gardner.
Right, but I will argue that that's not what's happening this year with Heidi. I think that like she's probably my biggest storyline for the first half of the season, which is that she ended up taking over for a lot of the roles of what what we would have seen potentially go to Kate. And I think the numbers are starting to reflect that. I mean, the fact that she's 7th in the power rankings is really good. I mean, that's very high up for what we would expect for Heidi. Like I would expect at this point that Heidi would be in the top 7 of the power rankings, and she's there, and she wasn't getting there prior because she was mostly like getting, times on update and some pre-tapes, and now she's really doing a lot in live sketches.
But I do feel like at the same, like I still think that it's both things can be true, where the show clearly has episodes that are slanted towards one cast member or another. It's almost like they know in advance, like, oh, Cecily's going to be doing her Lily Tomlin play, so like let's make this particular episode Cecily centric, and then this episode we'll use her fleetingly, and then we know that she's going to be gone for a couple weeks. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's part of the apparatus as well too,
Yeah, I guess the thing is like I get where you're coming from, where you're like, okay, the cast is too bloated, and this is why we're having this problem. But I maintained like my position going into 47, and I think this is something that reflects in the numbers, which is like the cast is bloated, and it's gonna stay bloated. Like that's the way they like it, and it's a matter of how
I
does
know,
SNL,
that's what I'm saying.
yeah, no, say, but then how does SNL use its cast members when it is bloated? And I think they're using them way better in 47 than they did in 46.
Yeah, I mean, that's a different point than what I'm making, but I totally
Yeah.
agree. I totally agree.
All right. Nicole, Mike, did anyone of you want to get in on this discussion before we move on to other stuff? Okay. All right. So let's talk about how these rankings compare to season 46 last season. So that's what I'm going to do. Mike, while I'm bringing up the season 46 rankings, any major changes though from this point, from our last podcast to this podcast that the viewers should know about in terms of the power rankings? Like anybody significantly move up or move down?
Kate, that was the one I said, obviously being her first appearance, but I was crunching some numbers. So if you want any of them, like I have them right here, but like Bowen was at, a 39 and then put up a 0 for the Rudd episode and went to a 35, things like that. People like that percentage wise dropped a lot. So, I mean, I'm looking at episode 9 right now, and we had live math here. We had 8 cast members put up 0s.
Okay.
Like that. And then we had like Chris, JJ, and Mikey make a quick appearance in the Pete pre-tape and scored 8 points. So like people like that, they count. But so that's 11 cast members that were basically had like a negligible impact on that episode for Paul Rudd. So that being said, but if you look at the Billie Eilish stats, it's like pretty crazy. Like to Andy's point there, or what you guys were just talking about, like that was a Kate episode. I mean, if we look back 5 years from now and the cast is all new and we see the Billie Eilish episode run, like, oh, this is a great Kate episode. We won't really remember that she was missing for 7 episodes before that. We'll see some metrics later that will show, episodes that was the biggest episode for that cast member this season. And then I have, going back seasons, I can, point to an episode that cast member really scored highest. So that was an outlier for Kate. Anyway, she had like 16 minutes of screen time in an episode.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so I want to get into the rankings from season 46. I want to talk about how they compare to season 47. Mike or Nicole, do you guys have those rankings in front of you? Because I know we are live, but I'm just having a slight computer issue, so I'm going to just jump out and jump back in. But in the meantime, if one of you wants to read out those rankings from season 46, that would be really helpful. And then I'll come back in and we'll continue on.
Nicole, do you have them? I can pull them up.
I think you probably have them more ready than I have them.
Okay, thanks. So, Mike, if you can just read out those for the listeners and then get going, I'll be back in a moment with everybody.
You got it.
Okay, thanks, buddy. No.
Okay, so while Mike pulls that up, what should we talk about? We're live.
No,
Andy,
I got it.
so what are you? Oh, you got it. Okay. I was like, let's do a little segment.
Right, this is,
let's improvise on the fly here, guys.
Yeah, this is season 46, episodes 1 through 9, comparing to this season, episodes 1 through 9. So we have Kate McKinnon at a 104 at number 1. So reminder, Keenan is number 1 this season at an 87. We have Beck Bennett at 100 right behind her. Number 3, Colin Jost, again, consistently scoring mid-70s. No surprises there, as he is the update host, and he's basically guaranteed between 4 to 9 minutes screen time an episode. Number 4 is Keenan at 66. Number 5 is Heidi at 64.3. She's in 7th place this year. Number 6, Ego Wodum, 62. 7 is Mikey Day at 61. He's right around the same area this year. 8, Michael Che, nearing a 61 as well. He's lower this year. Number 9, Pete Davidson, who had a really strong start in season 46 after missing a lot of time in season 45. And number 10, big drop off from 59 at Pete to Kyle Mooney at 44.5.
I'd like to call this the point where everyone should be like, what am I doing on this show? Like that. I feel like that drop off is like, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
everyone back.
Significant. I mean,
I'm back. Right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, everybody who's watching live. I just want to make sure we got this in all right. So you guys should be able to see the rankings from 46 up on screen now.
Yeah, we see him.
Okay, perfect. Yes, there's a little bit of
we
delay.
just got to Kyle, who's precisely 15 points lower than Pete, who's at number 9.
Perfect. Yes,
Kyle's
and
at
exactly,
10.
I came in exactly where I would expect, with Andy saying that the rest of the cast should just drop off.
Just break off into like an iceberg in the Titanic and just float away, you know?
Yeah. So let me finish just reading. I'll continue to go through just the rankings, and then we'll all go through just our thoughts about comparisons between 46 and 47. Anybody stands out particularly to all of you. So after Kyle Mooney, who's the first person who is under average for the season 46, we have Chloe Fineman at a 39.5, Chris at a 38.4, Bowen at 37.37, Moffat at 32.96. That seems a little bit low comparison, but we'll talk through that. Lauren Holt, obviously no longer on the cast, at 30. Melissa at 27.97, Dismukes at a 20, Cecily at a 19.53, obviously missing a ton of the first half of the season. That's why she is so low. Punky at 19.34, and then 80 Bryant, who again missed a ton of the first half of the season, 9.72. So really interesting stuff to talk through. You know, first half of 46 a year ago, and then first half of season 47. Okay. Let's all go through and give our thoughts on comparisons between last year and this year. Mike, let's start with you.
I was trying to throw in some of the commentary as I read through them, but it's I think Beck Bennett being a consistent over 100 average. We have to acknowledge that. I mean, we talked about it very briefly at the last By the Numbers, but you're talking about a 100-point vacuum that is up for grabs. Really, I think for male or female cast members, because we're looking at the top 7. You know, we had Ego, Heidi, Cecily, 80 in the top 7. So right away, there's more women than men. And then we had Colin, who if you want to count him as a cast member in that top. So really the Beck Bennett void, we've been talking about that a lot. Who's going to play those roles that Beck had? Well, in this year, I don't think it's really been number 2. We have Keenan at number 1, though, but Keenan's Keenan. I don't think Keenan and Beck have a ton of crossover, but we can talk about that.
Well, who would you say is taking the Beck roles? Just to finish that point.
Oh, I think probably Moffat, and I think we've also seen more Kyle too. But I mentioned it when I was reading them off while you were out. But Pete Davidson had a really strong beginning last year, and I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll ask you guys if you think the same way this year, but he's in a similar spot.
Is that because of Cuomo, do you think, Mike? The Pete Davidson boost there?
For last year?
Yeah, wasn't he playing Cuomo? Like, it was right at the peak of the pandemic.
He appeared as Cuomo.
I think it was at the
in February.
Yeah, I think it was the Reggae Jean episode he did Cuomo,
Okay.
so we wouldn't have seen that yet. But I do remember that the storyline for the first half of season 46, one of the major ones was, oh wow, Pete Davidson is having a great season. He was doing a lot of stuff in sketches and stuff, and potentially was like reinvigorated by coming back. What we thought was maybe post-pandemic. So I think that it's interesting to compare a cast member like Pete from 46 to 47 analytically, because my perception is that he's doing less sketch material this year, and now there's like many Pete focused pre-tapes that he's taking a lot of screen time. So my guess, Mike, is that the numbers would look similar, but how he's actually achieving the numbers are different, similar to like a home run hitter versus like a guy who's just knocking in doubles. Like he's just doing it a different way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can pull up the screen time comparison, but he was averaging last year 3 minutes 46 seconds, and this year basically 3 minutes. And he actually got a big bump from the Paul Rudd episode because he had over 4 minutes in one pre-tape. So as far as impact goes, there can be some comparisons, but screen time he's definitely down this year.
Okay. Andy, let's talk about anything that stands out to you for season 46 versus 47. Any of the cast members you think that you view differently, or the numbers tell you something that's different?
I mean, I really like that question of where did all of Beck Bennett's stats go? I think that's, again, like, what's the point of these numbers? Like, what story are they really telling? To me, Mike, I was a little surprised you didn't mention JAJ, because I feel like Beck last season, from what I remember, he was like Mr. Cold Open, right? Like he did like Mitch McConnell, like whatever. And I feel like J.A.J. has kind of filled that role a little bit. So I would be curious if you have the numbers, what percentage of Beck's numbers or whatever, I'm like losing myself, were cold open attributed, and what percentage were J.A.J.'s? Like, I feel like that's how you answer that question, you know?
Great point. I mean, if you guys want to vamp for a minute, I can probably pull them up.
Yeah, sure.
Well, let's shout out everyone in the chat room. What's up, guys? Ken Jones.
Okay. Well, no, let's talk about it, because I do think that is a good factor. I mean, one of the things we saw, Andy, was like, again, major storyline of the first half of season 47 was how many episodes in a row that we saw J.J. in the cold open, as well as Alex Moffat. And you would think that if those two guys were taking anything from Beck Bennett, it would be cold open stats.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what's really interesting to me is like Beck Bennett leaves the show, and then all of a sudden Lorne and the producers and the writers, they start looking towards some guy like some new guy comes in, James Austin Johnson, who could do a ton of impressions. And now they're like, hey, let's throw him into a bunch of cold opens, because that was where Beck was focused a lot. Now, I don't think J.J. is taking Beck's sketch work, but I do think that from the cold open perspective, that is
The
definitely true.
functionality, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, while Mike is looking up those stats, Andy, anything else from the season 46 people that compares to season 47 that really stands out for you?
I mean, the one thing that's carried over a little bit that I was thinking about is the gulf between Joe's numbers and Che's numbers. It's a little less overt here or whatever, like 73-60. I feel like it's stronger in this season, which I guess just speaks to screen time on update. I don't remember offhand how many appearances Jost had in regular sketches. Maybe you guys do. But it's like Che made up a little ground, I assume, by appearing in the Paul Rudd episode and Jost had COVID. But, anyway, it's not a huge point, but.
No, it is a good point, because that's one of those things that if you never listen to a By the Number show, you would never know this. You would always just assume that Jost and Che have the same amount of screen time, but they actually don't. And a lot of times the guest goes more to Jost, and Jost gets more time on screen, so he's often higher in the power rankings. But we had a very unique situation where obviously Jost was out with COVID for the Christmas show, and then Che comes in and does update with Tina Fey. So very interesting. Mike, do you got any stats for us?
One that's huge is that J.A.J. has 60.2% of his screen time this season has occurred on the cold open. So you are absolutely right, Andy. And Beck Bennett and Kate were huge. I think like 15 out of 20 cold open appearances. I think Kate might have had. Beck probably is not close. It's probably right behind her with that. So for sure. I think it's just that J.A.J. came in real hot, like almost like probably a record-breaking rookie first episode, and then came back on the cold open when he did Trump. He did Trump a second time on the next Janine Pirro cold open, but has not really had like huge numbers again. So he's had like 2 big episodes. So we kind of halted on the like greatest rookie season of all time. I think. I
think they're holding him back. I think he got so many strong headlines. They're like, all right, now he has a kid too, so that's another factor.
That's definitely a factor too.
Yeah.
He's
could I get 60 more seconds, please?
Yeah, it's just him every single week.
I was like, Nicole, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Bennett was 18.8% of his screen time in season 46 was.
But he was also all over the place, too.
All over the place.
But that's interesting.
Well, I have to wonder if J.J. ends up growing into the Beck Bennett stuff. Like, is he such a...
I think he will, yeah.
Is he such a good impressionist that he ends up being, the impressionist guy? Or does he eventually get to this point where it's like, okay, we've seen everything we can see from him. And it's very early, but have we seen everything we can see? And then it's like, okay, now he fills the void of the, the white male cast member in a lot of these sketches.
Right. Right. I mean, that's the question. It's almost like you have, this is an overgeneralization. So John, feel free to pop this bubble a little bit, but it's like, there's kind of like 2 archetypes when it comes to like male cast members, right? It's like, number one, you have the impressionists who can play all the politicians and shit like that, like the Daryl Hammond, the Jeff Richards guys, right? Then you have like the glue guys, right? That's like, they can play the dads, they can poke poke themselves at like white privilege, like Phil Hartman, Will Ferrell, Beck Bennett. Like there's almost like
Sudeikis.
two different lanes. Yeah, Sudeikis. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's like two different lanes, and it's like JJ can definitely do the one, right? But it's like, can he do? Because sometimes the impressionists they get stuck in their own. They get a little too pigeonholed, in my opinion. You need to be able to just do more than Dick Cheney. Like you can be a specialist. Clearly like Daryl Hammond did really well at that. But I think to be like a Hall of Famer, which I think JJ, it's early, has the potential to be, you need to be able to go to both lanes.
Yeah, and I don't think that we've seen them give him a chance to do that yet, from what I can tell. Like I think it's just like from all the sketches, I'm thinking through all the episodes, I think that's mostly an Alex Moffat thing at this point. I think that they've given Moffat either the husband role or the dad role. Not always the best kind of dad, including the one from the karaoke with Heidi Gardner. But
I have JJ's appearance list in front of me while we're on the subject, and it is the numbers definitely don't lie with JJ. I mean, I think he has an incredible future ahead of him. And we haven't really seen him play those type of roles you were listing, John, but right away, I mean, just so top heavy. I mean, I said it earlier, the 60.2% of his screen time is during the cold open. And I think if you ask people who've been watching the season, they'd be like, oh yeah, for sure. Because his appearances are, number one is his first appearance in the premiere cold open. Number two was the first Janine Pirro appearance. Number three is the Sudeikis cold open when he played Biden again. And then number four was the only sketch that comes up in that top when he played Joe Buck with Owen Wilson as Troy Aikman. Then the declaration pitch sketch with Sudeikis. Number five was a second Trump appearance. So right away, those are all the 3 minutes or more appearances. And the bottom, he's averaging, he's had a couple voices and a couple small appearances in pre-tapes, like the Jockey pre-tape, the Man Park pre-tape, the Target ad with Simu Liu, the ad awards, like things that are like literally 20 seconds or less.
Yeah.
So what percentage of JJ's appearances are impressions versus not impressions? Is it like
probably
90-10?
Well, I mean, he's had.
I think it's weighted though. I think it's not that simple, right? Because the impressions are 3 minute impressions, but
I'd be curious if you do have that number or figure it out. Like I would imagine it's got to be like 85-15 or something.
I mean, we could probably list them right now. 2 Trumps, 2 Bidens, Adam Driver, Louis C.K., Larry the Cable Guy, Joe Buck.
So it's 8.
So compared to sketch appearances like that, he just plays an unnamed character, like in the Jonathan Majors ad award sketch where he's 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So the impressions are definitely the bulk.
Let's keep going because we have a lot to cover on the show, and I just want to make sure that we get to our next section of things. So we talked about the 47, 46 rankings. Nicole, are you with us? You got us?
Yes, I hope so. I think so.
Okay, for sure. Okay. All right, let's keep going and let's talk about our next section. And Mike, let me have you introduce what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to be talking about pre-tapes versus sketches while I bring a chart up on screen.
Sure. This is a fun one I like to bring up every few shows we do of this, just because I'm very interested in people's opinions on maybe the sketches that non-SNL fans might share online or with friends. I was at work today in the office, and literally during lunch, a group of guys who probably never talk about SNL were watching the Casey Affleck Dunkin' Donuts sketch. So, like, years later, they were just watching that, and then right afterwards, someone suggested, "Oh, I don't really like SNL, but the greatest thing I've ever saw was the Oscar the Grouch sketch with the guy from Stranger Things." And then I heard them, argue over who that guy was. And I'm just laughing at my, desk because I'm like, I'm literally doing an SNL podcast tonight. But things like that. So when it comes to pre-tapes versus live sketches, I'm just interested because, this is a show that has stats you can't find anywhere else. Is like, what does that mean for your SNL legacy? What does it mean for your current celebrity at SNL? And what does it mean for the show? Because it's a live show, not a pre-tape show. And people think of SNL, they don't think of pre-tapes, but they are a very, very significant portion of the content. So I wanted to break it up with who's appearing in the most live sketches. That doesn't not include cold opens or weekend updates or monologues, just live sketches that occur after the monologue, and who's appearing in the most pre-tapes, and of their time this season, how much of that is dedicated to either sketches or pre-tapes.
Right. Okay. So the question we're asking is what percentage of this season's sketches has a cast member appeared in, and what percentage of this season's pre-tapes has a cast member appeared in? And we have a chart up on screen right now that shows every single cast member and what percentage of the season sketches have they appeared in. And let me read the top 5 and the bottom 5, and we'll kind of talk through it. So the top 5, Kenan Thompson. 52.5% of sketches, live sketches this season, Kenan Thompson has had an appearance in. That is crazy. Then 47.5%, Cecily Strong and Heidi Gardner tied for second place there. Then we had Ego Wodem, who is next at 42.5%, and Adie Bryant at 37.5%. As for our bottom 5 here, we have Pete Davidson at 22.5%, Aristotle at 20%, Kate at 7%, and then Joseph and Shay were at the bottom there, 0%. So I guess really the bottom 5 of the cast members is from the bottom going up is Kate, Aristotle, Pete. James Austin Johnson is also in 22.5%, and Sarah Sherman at 25%. Okay, so interesting that Pete is there with the rookies. All right, Nicole, if we have you, let us know your thoughts on the sketch stats we see here.
Yes. So these are, to be clear, the live sketches.
Correct.
What percentage of live sketches? Right. So this is interesting to me because one element that we've had some conversations about this, and it has changed things for us and whatever, is voiceovers. And I think that there are more cast member voiceovers in pre-tapes than in sketches. I think Higgins covers, I think, a larger proportion of live voiceovers than pre-tape voiceovers, and then Cecily, Heidi, they have a lot. JJ is getting in there with the pre-tape voiceovers. So I was gonna say when I first saw this graphic, when I didn't compute what it was, I was like, oh yeah, Cecily and Heidi and Ego even too, actually, I think do voiceover work. So I'm really curious to see where they line up for pre-tapes, because that is when you're talking about pure quantity stats rather than like an amount of time per sketch or a power ranking, something that is just number of times. For a few different types of stats we cover, voiceovers are just something that can really have a huge impact on those like pure numbers. But this just shows like it's not surprising. These are people who are, I'd say, what I'm looking at the top, I'd say 4: Kenan, Cecily, Heidi, and Ego. And for me, the common thread with all of them is that they're kind of utility players. You could categorize all of them that way. Is they can do a lot of different types of things, and you can put them in a lot of different types of roles. And then as you get lower on the list, it's maybe you have someone who does all the great impressions, or not all, but a lot of the really, really amazing impressions specifically, or someone who has a lot of those buzzy moments, like the Pete moments. And you have these things that are more niche and specific at the bottom of the list, but at the top, it's people who you can throw them in anything, anywhere, any type of role, a lead role, a small role, and they always rise to the occasion. So for me, the top 4 here, and 82, I would categorize in that. But yeah, that's sort of the common thread for me I'm seeing.
For sure. Andy, let me know what you think. Anyone on this list stand out to you in terms of their metrics?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised by how low James Austin Johnson is on this list, and the fact that he is tied seemingly with Pete Davidson. I mean, that's kind of alarming. James Austin Johnson has incredible skills, clearly. For people who have followed him online for years with Trump or whatever, had a historic first episode of the season. Compared to Pete, who, I like Pete. I think Pete is very charming, but Pete's not a sketch performer. So the fact that they are ranked neck and neck is kind of shocking. Like we were just saying, I feel like JAJ's been held back a little bit since his debut episode. So it's surprising to see him at the bottom tier like that, especially compared to someone like Kyle Mooney, like seeing Kyle that high up.
Kyle
is
with
kinda
35%.
shocking. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then Andrew Dismukes also at 35% as well. So interesting to talk about. I mean, I think the thing for me that stands out here in terms of the sketch stats, and we're going to take a comparison to the pre-tape stats in a second, but it's really female dominated at the top of these rankings. And really by, Cecily and Edie, you would expect to be in these top of these rankings no matter what they do whenever they're on the screen. Obviously, sketch writers are going to want to write them into their sketches. But the goal for this season, and one of the things that we talked about in our preseason By the Numbers show was, is this the year that we're going to start to get some of the other newer ladies on the show to step up and get into more sketches? And I think we're definitely seeing that with Heidi Gardner and Ego Wodem. I would say my, one slight disappointment is that I would have liked Chloe Feynman to be written into more sketches, and she's really at the middle of the pack here, 27.5% of live sketches. But, just looking at the positives here, very thrilled to see that Heidi and Ego are so high up on this, and I hope that continues to go. But I still think that the SNL is trying to figure out what to do with their men of the cast, because this is a stat that, as we spoke about, you would expect that, Beck Bennett would have been at the top of if he was still on the cast. Okay, let's compare this to the pre-tapes, and let's talk about how people look in pre-tapes compared to sketches. So I will bring that up on screen right now. Hold on, everybody. And here we go. Okay, so we have our pre-tape stats, and this is what percentage of this season's pre-tapes has the cast members appeared in. And this looks a little bit different because at the top, let's give our top 5. Chris Redd, Mikey Day, Kyle Mooney, Alex Moffat, and James Austin Johnson. So to 5 men at the top of this list, with Chris Redd, 45% of the pre-tapes, 45.5, he has been in those pre-tapes. Mikey Day at 40.9, Kyle at 36.4, Alex at 36.4, and JAJ at 36.4. At the bottom for pre-tapes, not including Jostin Shea, I'll read out our bottom 5. And that would be Sarah Sherman, who's in 18.2, Aristotle at 18.2, Melissa at 13.6, Ponky at 13.6, and obviously Kate McKinnon at 13.6. So a little bit different here, a little bit of a gender discrepancy. Nicole, did you want to jump in on and talk about why we may see more men in pre-tapes than women in sketches?
Yeah, I just started laughing when I saw this. Actually, it reminded me of the headline that went around, I think it was last spring, when it was the pre-tape with Kid Cudi, cameo by Timothy Chalamet, Pete Davidson, and Chris Redd was just forgotten in the headline. And then people like overcompensated and like gave him all his own headlines for a few weeks. And it was this funny joke. And as everyone who's listening knows, Chris Redd is like super funny and engaged on Twitter and social media with stuff like this. So he like really made it extra funny, like by engaging with it. So I just started laughing when I saw that he's number 1. And I'm like, it's funny because it's true. He is the backbone of so many pre-tapes on this show. He's often not the star. Pete is often, he works with Pete so much, but then he also works with Kyle. So he does like any type of pre-tape, whether it's musical, or it's rap, it's anything, whether it's like a commercial, a parody, like he is all over the place with the pre-tapes. And I do think it's more often than not in supporting roles, and his celebrity status isn't what Pete Davidson's celebrity status is. So when the headlines come out about the pre-tapes from Saturday night before on Sunday morning, sometimes he's not the star of the headline. And I just like, I love how he made a joke of it too, and like all the outlets were like playing with him, and it was just funny. So yeah, all that's to say is like, to me, Chris Redd is the I would say what Keenan is to live sketches, Chris is to pre-tapes on this show. All types of pre-tapes. He is the backbone. He's usually not the star, but he always makes them better. He always makes everyone else around him look better than they would if he himself weren't there. So that's a comparison I just decided on, and I want to run with it and see if it plays out in the spring.
Yeah, definitely. I think the interesting stat is you talked about Chris Redd and Pete Davidson's comparison, and something else that Mike did on these stats is he also said how much of a certain cast member's screen time is actually dedicated to the pre-tapes. So it was interesting here that the winner in that department is Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson, 45% of Pete Davidson's screen time is in pre-tapes, more than anybody else's in the cast. But Chris is actually in 45% of the total pre-tape. So it's when you talk about impact and you think of pre-tapes this season, I think of a ton of Pete pre-tapes, right? We had you can name like 3 sad versions. We obviously had all the, all the stuff that we saw at Christmas. He was the main star of that.
The Big Wet with my fellow, my high school graduate, Big Wet went to my high school, my friend who I never met, but he's a couple years older than me. I just have to bring it up every time.
Yeah, when he was Little Wet. And
yeah.
the
Good.
So, I mean, Pete, when you think of pre-tapes in season 47, oftentimes you're going to think of Pete Davidson, but it's really Chris Redd that's been dominating these. Andy, do you want to get in here on the pre-tape stats?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything more original to say than what Nicole was just articulating, but it definitely makes sense to see Pete, Kyle, and Chris dominate their total percentage of screen time being coming through the pre-tapes. It's almost like the modern update, like if you can't get in sketches, you go to the update desk, but in a post Lonely Island world, pre-tapes are, not an easy, but an alternative way to get your name out there, especially in the case of someone like, Kyle or Pete, and Chris to a lesser extent, where it's, this is their bread and butter, like I just was saying, Pete is not a sketch performer. He clearly is a little bit more adept at camouflaging his skills in pre-tapes. I'm not a big fan of Pete rapping. I think Chris probably beats him from a skills wise, but he definitely lands some jokes there, and those are entertaining. So it makes a lot of sense to see those 3 at the top of the pack there.
Yeah, but I would say that the big difference between 47 and 46 or 47 in the last few seasons is obviously the Please Don't Destroy element to the pre-tapes. And that's something that isn't factored into the numbers here that you can see. But I will bring in Mike in on this. It's just that obviously, they have a consistent role on the show every single week. For a fact that they are going to produce something. Does it get on screen every single week? No, not yet so far, but that Please Don't Destroy is going to produce something. So the key is can you get in with them? And we definitely got to see that over New Year's, where we saw that they were brought down to Miami for the Pete Davidson and Miley Cyrus thing. So their star keeps growing brighter and brighter. And now that they're, if you want to get in pre-tapes, you're in a Please Don't Destroy pre-tape, you have the name cachet that maybe wasn't necessarily there before. It's definitely an interesting conversation.
John, do you think that they'll be made cast members at some point? I don't know if you touched on that before. You do?
So I do. I actually believe that they were going to be cast members. My theory is that basically the veterans of the cast were given until about a week before the season to decide if they wanted to come back or not. I'm pretty sure at the Emmy Awards, they were still somewhat unsure. And I believe if certain cast members had left the show, then they would have, Please Don't Destroy actually would have been brought on for this season. Because we ended up having most of the cast return. I believe they were given writer roles, and I think I would guess that we would see them as cast members next year. I'd be pretty surprised if we didn't.
Right.
Okay, Mike, do you want to jump in here on the end of our discussion of the pre-tape stats?
I was going to give a volume stat on the male-female discussion because I think it's a really interesting one that sometimes the numbers present themselves to you, and you're like, oh wow, like I wasn't pursuing that angle, but now it's here, so we should run with it. Is that the male cast members contribute 41 minutes of screen time to pre-tapes versus female cast members, which are at 25, almost 26 minutes. So that's basically like, 2/3 to 1/3. And that's not including the Please Don't Destroy guys who have 10 minutes and 20 seconds of their own. So I just think it's interesting, dichotomy of male, female to pre-tape sketch. It's like, I was thinking back to Franken and Davis or Albert Brooks or Peter Aykroyd or like people who were making short films, and is there something to be said about female performers in front of the camera versus male performers behind the camera, and I think Pete Davidson, I'm sure, Nicole would love to jump in, is like, maybe Pete's like, hey, I'll do SNL on my own time. Like maybe at 11:55 p.m. I won't be available, but I will be available Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. So I don't know what that
really
says
good
about
point.
this cast, but it's a huge difference for a pretty even split gender-wise cast, especially if you don't include Che and Jost. So it's pretty evenly split, and the fact that the men contribute so much more to pre-tapes and the women contribute more to sketches. And with pre-tapes, there is like a second life sometimes. Either it's cut for time and right on YouTube, or sometimes it's cut. We don't know it's cut, and then it appears next week or the week after. Where a live sketch also can, sometimes they pop up seasons later if they're rewritten for a new host. But I think we talked about Kyle Mooney in the preseason, and he's now been in 8 pre-tapes. I forget how much we guessed for the over/under. But it's kind of a funny story though, that a lot of these guys are just writing these pre-written performances for themselves and then going with the film unit, making them, and then they make the show.
Yeah. I think we'd also be remiss not to like mention that the majority of the hosts in the first half of the season were male also. So I do think that like you have to wonder what the factor is there. Like if the gender discrepancy in the hosts were a little bit more even, would we see is there something to the fact that there's more male hosts means that males are dominating pre-tapes, means there's more male subjects to explore on the pre-tapes, whereas if it was more neutral, would these stats that we just looked at for this section of the podcast look more even across the board?
That's a great point. And when you mentioned that, I'm thinking of Kim Kardashian, The Switch with Adie Bryant, and Billie Eilish, Lonely Christmas with Kate. Kate, Kyle also had a big pre-tape in the Billie Eilish episode too. So I have to mention that, but you're absolutely right, John, that there was 2 very female-driven pre-tapes in the 2 female-hosted episodes.
Yeah. Nicole, did you want to jump in on anything, or are we good?
I just like the point you made that if you're someone like Pete and you are a massive celebrity who has other demands outside of the show, for some people being on the show is the biggest thing about your life, and for some people it's not. And Pete Davidson is someone for whom I imagine at this point it is not the most time-consuming thing about his life, or the most whatever, biggest, however you want to define that. There's a John joke in there somewhere. I won't make it, but it's there. Anyways,
John joke.
John joke. When I said the biggest thing about his life,
You mean
right
something
there.
like
I was a famous sex symbol for reasons no one could understand.
That's what you meant?
I meant whatever. Actually, she okay, I won't get into it. But anyways, it's a joke. There's a joke. Everyone can find a joke or two in there. But anyway, so yeah, it's just interesting to think like that's a strategy to stay on the show, to have the backbone of your career be this show, to also have a big celebrity buzzy lifestyle where you're jetting off for 36 hours to wherever and hosting the thing in Miami with Miley, and you're doing all these things. Yeah, I think that it's a great strategy for Pete to really be in on the pre-tapes, and then if he ends up it's Saturday night and he's like, I'm not going to be here, then if he was planning to be here and he's not, someone else can take his role. Like, not that Pete should be inconveniencing everybody, but if you're a massive celebrity, that the show, I think, should do what it can to keep him around. It makes the show more relevant. Like, then that's great. Like, he can be kind of on his own terms as long as he's not disrupting the flow of things. So it's just a cool thing that if you're a pre-tape person, that I kind of gives you more flexibility about your time. So that's cool to think about.
Yeah. All right, let's get into our next metric.
Does anyone want to take a
Mike.
guess at what Pete's longest live performance was this season?
Minutes.
Is this a John joke, or you have an actual stat for me?
No, I have an actual stat.
Okay.
Like minutes in an individual sketch.
Yeah, longest duration of live performance on Saturday Night Live on NBC.
90 seconds.
Is it?
No, I mean which sketch?
Oh.
The one from the Paul Rudd
Cuomo.
episode. Or you're talking just lives?
This
No,
is
live sketch.
live. Yeah.
Is it Cuomo?
No, it was Aladdin
was
with
it-
Kim Kardashian.
Of course,
that
of
makes
course,
sense.
of course. Yeah.
And that was
makes sense.
up front of the show. I was there in person, and it was the first one after the monologue, and I was just like, okay, this is a moment. Like, we're all gonna. I knew
Yeah,
somehow.
you witnessed history. Yeah.
I did. I knew it too. I knew I
You
was
witnessed
witnessing
probably the
something.
second or third kiss.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Pretty
let's get into our
crazy.
next metric that we have here on the By the Numbers show. Okay. This is our cast consistency metric. This is a new stat for all of our friends out there who love Mike Murray statistics. So, Mike, I'm handing off the reins to you. Explain to us what we see here.
All right, this is the time of night where we get intense. So this is a brand new one. I figured that I had to bring the heat and get something completely new that we hadn't talked about before that might shed some light on cast members who are standouts or cast members who are glue or both or neither. So this stat is trying to determine who avoids peaks and valleys this season. So we can hopefully have a discussion about, if that's good or bad to have peaks and valleys, or it's good to stay consistent. That's what the purpose of this is. But I found it by looking at the screen time of each cast member from each episode. For this one, disclaimer, Andy, I dropped Paul Rudd because there were too many zeros. It just wouldn't make sense. So this is 1 through 8 in this chart you're seeing right here. And what I did was I took their screen time from every episode, percentage of their total for that episode. So if they were in, X amount of minutes in that episode, what is that of their grand total for this season? And then took their highest and lowest, subtracted that, subtracted the lowest from the highest to get that middle number. So if you have a ton of screen time in episode 4 and 0 in episode 5, you're going to have a big chasm of that number. So you're going to be like maybe more likely to be a streaky player. If you have, the big update guest spot, you're in the cold open, you do a sketch, next week you're nowhere to be found. You're going to score low on this chart. But if you're in, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes every episode, and every time we tune in to SNL, we see you, you're going to score really well in this. So you want a low number for this chart. So that's why I need to throw that out there. So you want a low number to score high here because it means that you're consistently putting up similar numbers each week, and that's what we're seeing here.
Okay, so basically, we're looking for consistency across the board here. So you can rely on this person having the same amount of screen time each week. And right away, I mean, this stands out to me. This is very interesting. Heidi and Ego at the top. So like we spoke about, I mean, they have consistent amount of screen time so far in season 47. That's really fascinating to me. Pete Davidson at number 3 coming in consistent in terms of consistency. So you can always expect that Pete will be consistently producing the same amount so far this season. Then followed by Alex Moffat, Kenan Thompson at 5, Cecily at 6, Mikey at 7, 80 at 8, Kyle at 9, Punky at 10. In the bottom, we see Chloe, then Andrew, JAJ, Chris, Sarah, Aristotle, Bowen, Melissa, and then Kate. Okay. Andy, send it over to you. Thoughts on our consistency chart that we see over here?
Well, first, I think the Pete stat or the Pete placement's a little misleading because if you look at I think the floor numbers are the most illuminating here. He's got 15 seconds, so it's just he was so concentrated on that Kim Kardashian, it's yielding a high average. To me, maybe Kenan and Heidi aside, the two that are most that stand out the most to me out of this are Ego and Mikey Day. They don't have the highest of highs, it doesn't appear, but they have a pretty strong floor. In other words, Heidi's at 138, Mikey's at 158. Which beyond like Kenan puts them near the top of the lowest amount of screen time per their individual episode. So to me, I almost think that Ego and Mikey are the most consistent here. Like the averages aside, which can get skewed, it seems like they have like the most like normal high and highest low. In other words,
yeah, you're right. You're right. There's no like the peaks and the valleys are not as peakful and valleyful.
Yeah,
So,
like theirs is like a nice wave almost, relatively.
interesting. Yeah, that's a great point, Andy. Nicole, thoughts on this chart?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And it kind of goes into the conversation we've been having of if do what you're good at, I guess. And so with Pete, he's become very known on this show for showing up for 15 seconds and doing an impression of a super famous person, and then doing one or two other things in the night. And like, that's, you can kind of, when we say you can rely, so to speak, on the top people on this list, I think it's just, you can rely on them to perform the way they typically do. Not necessarily, you know, that they will always be in a good amount, but you kind of know what you're getting. And with Pete, that's a new storyline in itself. So just to counter a little bit what you said, yes, it's misleading, but also it is more consistency. I would imagine, if we pulled this chart from past years, more consistency from him probably than we've ever seen. Even if the bar is a little bit low, it's one of the lowest, if not the lowest. It's definitely bottom half, I'd say, on the chart, right? So pretty low bar, but he's been, you could say he's been nothing if not consistent, which sounds like a phrase that wouldn't apply to Pete, but here we are. I do agree, though, that it's just cool to see people who are just more consistently, like, the lows, like the lows aren't that low, and then the highs are still high, and so it's just people. I think that shows that you are just relied on it on the show, and that there are always, whatever is going on the show, like, you are wanted to be involved. You are written into things, and people want to be working with you. And it's not like week to week, if you have this really great idea and it's like this your own personal one-time huge thing, then you're going to have it, and then the next week is a little bit more up in the air. I think the people at the top who have the high floors, they just seem like people that are always being thought about and brought into the mix in all the conversations of a lot of different writers. Whenever you're writing, oh, who should play the mom? Oh, who should play the funny, quirky cousin? Or who should play the kid at the amusement park? Like, when all those conversations are happening, even if you're not the one writing for yourself or having the ideas, it feels like the people at the top are come to mind for such a large number of those different characters and conversations with a lot of different writers. And I think we could also observe that if we're talking about different writers and who they write for. We know there are people who often write they have pairs and groups and things, but I feel like the people at the top seem like they've been in sketches written by themselves, written by a wide variety of writers. So it feels, this is really cool. I feel like we could just have one episode talking about this. Could
It's
do
a
this
great
for
chart.
2 hours.
It's a great chart, but it's amazing. I just want to center our discussion around this question. And this question is, Mike, I know you wanted us to talk about this. Is it better to be consistent, or is it better to break out every now and then? And that's the real question here. Is consistency is interesting because you can expect this stuff, but this goes back to a conversation we've been having for many, many shows, which is, is a breakout night more important? Because the discussion the entire week in all the SNL podcasts, all the SNL newspapers is, oh wow, that person had a great episode. Or is consistency, is consistency king? And I think Kenan Thompson is probably the definition of consistency when you go back to his career, at least in the last however many years. But is the breakout more important? So, Andy, I'll send it to you. What do you think about that?
Well, John, you're a veteran of the SNL Twitter wars, so the question is always, is it greater to be feared or respected, or feared or loved? The answer is both, right?
Sure,
so yeah. I think in this case, you got to define your terms a little bit. So yes, in terms of like your own career prospects, it's probably greater to, every 4 episodes come out and hit one out of the park. But for the sake of the show, you need guys like Ego and apparently Mikey Day, who are consistent too. So it's almost like, depending on how you look at it, one is more valuable than the other, but it's almost like an inversion, whether your prospects are greater if you hit one out, and you get all the Twitter headlines and get good coverage in Entertainment Weekly. That's one thing. But for the sake of the show, you need these guys who are slow and steady and able to produce in a variety of different ways, and don't just blank and get 0 screen time, every other episode.
For sure. Mike, you have an opinion on this?
I just have a relevant stat, I guess that's why I'm here. But it's it's that Mikey Day and Alex Moffat have perfect attendance for 3 straight seasons. So they haven't put up a single 0 for 3 years. but I don't think there's a single person in the SNL fan community that would say that, oh, Mikey Day, Alex Moffat, they're like the next, Belushi and Aykroyd. So, I mean, that's
right.
it's a relevant thing to say because they have not missed, including the Paul Rudd episode. I mean, they were even in that episode. So they are,
Well, I would just argue though that I think that Mikey Day and Alex Moffat, though they came in together and though they're seen as a lot as a like a little bit of a dynamic duo in certain senses, I actually think that they've had way different SNL careers. I think that Mikey
oh,
Day,
sure. I mean,
yeah,
they're not stars of the show, despite excellent consistency.
Well, I would say that just to like further the point, I think Mikey Day is the definition of consistency. Obviously, you're going to get your Mikey Day, Streeter Seidel sketch every single week. But I think in terms of Alex Moffat, this is somebody who we're talking about for every single By the Number show is not doing enough. And then eventually, now that Beck's gone, is probably taking a lot of those roles. So now I think he's actually going up. But I think it's a very interesting point that despite what you may think, Alex has actually been more consistently part of the show, even though a lot of people have been arguing to get him more a part of the show. Okay. Anyone else got anything on this chart, or do you want to move on? All right. Let's talk about what's going to be coming up next. Let's talk about our host synergy chart, and this will be interesting to discuss. So, Mike, why don't you introduce what we're going to be talking about in this section of the podcast?
This is something I've been working on for a while. Different pairings of, scene partners, this and that. And this one we came up with inspiration from Nicole too, is that talking about how often do you appear on the show? And then when you do appear, how often are you playing off of, supporting on camera with the host of the episode who, ordinarily makes 6, 7, 8, 9 appearances in that episode. So obviously if you appear in the episode, you have a good chance of being with the host, but you'd be surprised how often that does not happen. So on this chart, we have the cast member, how many times they've appeared this season, and of those, how many were alongside or talking to the host, and then the percentage of that. So I broke it up in the thirds, kind of like your high tier interacts with the host the most, mid tier, and lower tier who interacts with the host the least.
All right, let's break up these tiers and let's talk about what we see on this chart for all of our audio listeners. So in our upper tier, and I'm going to give you percentages here. These are the percentages of their appearances, of the cast members' appearances, how many of them are with the host. Okay, so Kenan Thompson is leading this chart with 24 of his 35 appearances for 68.57%. Ego has 65.38%. 80 is 60%. Kyle is 55.56. Mikey Day as well, 55.56. Dismukes is at 54.17. And Moffat is at 53.85%. And that is our upper tier. In our mid tier, we see Bowen Yang at 52.63, Heidi at 51.61, 250% here with Sarah Sherman and Kate McKinnon. Melissa is here at 44.44, Cecily and Punky both at 43.75%. And in our bottom tier, we have Chris Red, who is at 40.74, JAJ is at 39.13, Chloe Feynman at 38.1, Pete at 34.78, Aristotle at 33.33%, and then Che and Jost at the bottom, Che with 22.22 and Colin at 10%. All right. So, Nicole, this was a chart that you inspired. So give us your thoughts on what you see here.
Yeah. We talked, Mike and I were talking a while ago about different things and how host synergy, just like how all the implications of it and why it's worth thinking about it in this way. And I'm so happy that you like made this. It looks really cool. And I love the three tiers. So looking at it is, the people at the top, what they all have in common is like, I see these names and I'm instantly thinking of iconic sketches that they've done like in pairs with hosts from the season, like Ego and Jason, that the parent teacher conference one, Adi and Rami, Kenan, a million different things. I feel like he's always with the host. Jonathan Majors, that episode he was really active with the host in particular. So it's cool to see that the top, you just think of these people as, again, a lot of the same names of people who are just doing so many different types of things on the show. It makes sense that they're also people who are interacting with the hosts a lot. And then they're also personal connections. So when it's a former cast member, There's a pretty good chance that they were on the show with Keenan at some point. Either it's just like the stats on that. I guess we could run the numbers, Mike. I'd be so curious. What if there is a former cast member who is alive? What's the chances that they have been a cast member with Keenan Thompson? I'd love to know that. So after this, we'll look into it. But anyway, so yeah. When there's a former cast member, like it's Keenan's time to shine, and that's always really nostalgic and sentimental, which is very true for the Jason show. So yeah, the top ones, it is a really good feeling. I'd say I'm seeing more impressionists in the middle and the bottom, people who do their best work when they're not necessarily interacting with someone who is in a host capacity. Impressionists usually operate either individually or they're with other people who are doing very specific impressions, and more often than not that is not the host, especially the political impressions. It's pretty much very, very rarely are they interacting with hosts in the cold open. So it makes sense that people who were that's their bread and butter, like a JAJ, I would have predicted he'd be like right where he is, such a breakout star. But then when you think about all the work he's done, it's like, being Donald Trump in a frame by himself for these 60-second increments, like over and over again. That's like what we think of for him. So it's cool. This chart has so many implications for like the types of roles that people are occupying on the show, and what that means. So again, this one, it's so great. We could talk about this forever, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Andy, what about you? Anything here stand out to you? Cast members interacting with the hosts the most?
Well, I mean, I think you can kind of, as you guys have done, break it down in a couple different ways, a couple different brackets here. The first one seems like it's a tale of two different things here. The first is the established veterans, the stars. It makes sense, obviously, that they would get time with the host, Keenan, 80, the second tier is, guys who are more like workhorses and kind of grind it out quietly. Like, again, Ego keeps on popping up at the top of these lists. Like, she's not an institution like Keenan Thompson, but I think it speaks volumes that, she's only, 3.2 points behind him. Like that's an honor to be with the host, right? And it says a lot about your ability to pitch, right? That the hosts are drawn to her and gravitated towards her. A sub bullet to that is, guys who are writers and know what they're doing and have distinct points of view. Mikey Day, Kyle Mooney. It also makes a lot of sense to see both them kind of pop out and finagle away where they're probably writing a lot of sketches that put them in the same room as the host. And Dismukes is kind of surprising as well too. But I would file that in a similar category as well too, where he clearly knows how to write. He has a voice, and he's getting himself used in a utility capacity as well too. So there's a couple different things that, at least in this first bucket, that you can really draw from, that I think underscore a lot of the dynamics that are going on in the show at large.
Definitely. I think for me, the main person that surprises me on this list, I mean, if you gave me the list completely blank and I had to fill in the names, I would not necessarily know why Chloe Fineman would be in the bottom of the list. Why is, she's only in 8 sketches with the host out of 21. I mean, people at the bottom of the list I can understand. James Austin Johnson in a lot of College Opens, Chris Redd in a lot of pre-tapes. So I get that. Pete Davidson, obviously, in a lot of pre-tapes. Aristotle, naturally, as a first-year cast member, perhaps he's in sketches or pre-tapes that don't necessarily always involve the host. But Chloe Fineman is a weird one for me to be at the bottom of this list. I don't know why she's not being written.
I think it's the balloon theory again. I think it's the balloon theory. You squeeze it, like you said. Heidi's been able to fill in the gap while Kate's been out. But someone like Chloe might be at her expense a little bit,
Yeah, exactly. Okay. This is really interesting to talk through all these metrics. Mike, I think you did a great job, coming up with all these different cast metrics for this special mid-season show. Obviously, it's very interesting to look at the first half of the season and predict what we're going to be seeing in the second half. And we're going to be doing that right now with a new game. So this is our last section of the show. And, usually we play different games. We play daily fantasy games here. We've done different stuff. But Mike has come up with a new SNL Network game that he wants to test out on the panelists. So, Mike, let you explain the rules of this game.
All right, it's inspired by our previous games. We're just keeping it real simple, though. We've talked. This is our 8th By the Numbers show. Every single one of them, we've done rankings. So we're giving you the opportunity to pick your own rankings. So picking your top 10 cast members you think will perform have the most impact, have the highest scores this week. So you will pick 1 through 10 in order. Do you think that Kate is going to have a breakout episode again? Then you pick her number 1. If you think Melissa will finally crack the top 10, throw her in there. Go ahead, John.
So this is for the Ariana DeBose episode, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So this week, we are going to play for this week. So again, this is not a volume stat. This is this week, which is what the power ranking is all about. The power ranking is not about, racking up the numbers. It's about a large sample size, looking over that data for sure. But power ranking is about impact on that night. So if there's a ton of cameos, the cast scores will be lower, of course. If there's less host, the cast will score higher, all that stuff. But it's all relative to that episode, cast member versus cast member, the whole picture. So we are going to guess our top 10s for this episode. And we're also going to predict who says live from New York at Saturday night and who will be a guest at the Weekend Update desk. Those are the 3 criteria.
So what do you want us to do on the podcast? You want us to give you our top 10 for the week and the live from New York and the Weekend Update guest? Is that what it is?
Hell yeah.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Is anybody ready?
I'll go first.
I just have, before we start, I just have a clarifying thing that we should establish. So for Cecily, so she's doing her one-woman show right now. Do we know what if she's expected to be there and in what capacity?
I don't think we do. So I think you have to factor that into your guess about the episode. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Gonna put her as questionable on the
yeah, she's a game time decision.
Update.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly.
for anyone who does fantasy football, the season's over. So this is your new season.
Okay. Andy, let's hear your top 10 for the episode while Nicole and I do ours.
Sure. Keenan, Heidi, Ego, 80, Kyle, Dismukes, Mikey Day, Chris Red, Bowen Yang, and I'm going to give the last slot to James Austin Johnson.
Interesting. Okay. And then who do you think will be saying live from New York this week?
I'm going to say it's going to be Kate in some sort of grotesque male drag. And
we just do one, right? Or do we get a bonus, Mike?
Mike, is it 1 or we keep going? What if it's 10 people who say it?
Oh, you pick one. So if they say it, you get the points.
We only have one, right?
Okay. All right. Oh, I'm going to go with Kate. But in my fantasy I was about to describe is Kate is like Fauci or something really terrible. And it's also going to be James Austin Johnson. It's going to be like a 2 of them, like doing like a dual thing. That's my prediction. And they'll be like live from New York and everyone will clap.
Okay. All right. Nicole, do you have your top 10?
Oh man. Yeah, I think I do. I think I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, I do. I got it.
Go.
Okay. I'm going. And then so after we'll write this all down, everything. Okay. So I've got Keenan, Kate, Cecily, Bowen, Chris, Dismukes, Chloe, JAJ, Sarah, and Punky.
Okay, Punky in the top 10.
Order.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
all right. So who will be? Give me who's going to be saying live from New York this week.
Okay. So I'm. This doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm just in a silly mood. Cecily, I'm going to say, and I'm saying it's silly of me because if she is there on deck, she's going to be doing something fun with Ariana because they were in Schmigadoon together. So if we're getting her precious time while she's in this amazing one-woman show, like it's going to be working with Ariana. But I still think she's going to say it. I just have this gut feeling. It doesn't make any sense. But I'm going to say it. Also, she's just having a killer live from New York season. And I like to see that for her. So we're doing that. And then update is Kate. Like I think we need the first update of 2022. I feel like it could be. I'm not the biggest Winotis fan. I think it kind of tires easily, but I could 100% see that character being like the first update character of 2022. It would fit. So I think it could be that. I would rather it not be a Kate and 80 duo on update. I prefer them elsewhere. Their update characters are not where I love them the most. But I could see that too. So I'm gonna go. It's gonna be one or the other. But Kate is my update. Cecily is my live from New York.
Okay. All right, let me give you my top 10. These are the 10 people I think will be have the most highest scores for this week in the Ariana DeBose Roddy Rich episode. I'll go with Kate McKinnon number 1. I think she's going to come out swinging for the second half of the season. Who knows if this will be the swan song or not, but I think that we're going to get a lot of Kate in 47B. I'd say Ego will be at number 2. Give me Keenan Thompson at number 3. 80 at number 4. Heidi at 5. Mikey at 6. Chris Red is at 7. 8 and 9, I was thinking about this. I think I'm going to go with Bowen Yang and Cecily Strong. Obviously, 2 people who very, very much love Broadway. So if Cecily is there, I think we might see some stuff with Ariana. And then at 10, I went with Alex Moffat. For my live from New York person for this week, I'm going to take James Austin Johnson. I feel like we might get Biden for our first, of 2022 episode. So I think it's possible. And I'm just going to throw something out for a weekend update. This is something I'd like to see, something that we haven't talked about tonight, but something I would love to see eventually is give me James Austin Johnson on a weekend update. I think he's dominated every other aspect of the show potentially so far. I mean, he's getting their impressions, moving up into live sketches. Let's see what he can do on Weekend Update. We have not seen that yet. That was something that, as Andy had mentioned earlier in the podcast, we ended up seeing a lot of that from other impressionists. We saw Daryl Hammond on Weekend Update a ton of times. Will we get to see James Austin Johnson on Weekend Update? That is my big question going into the beginning of season 47B. Okay, Mike, let's get your numbers.
All right. I was not planning on playing because I know it was a conflict of interest.
Too bad.
But I'm playing anyway. Why not?
You better win. It'd be embarrassing if you don't win now. If you're going to bring up the conflict of interest, then we have to root for you, I guess. That's all
I'd sabotage myself before that. So my top 10 is Kate, Keenan, Jost, 80, Heidi, Ego, Chris Red, Che, Cecily Dismukes. It's my top 10. Live from New York, Kate. Update, Kate.
Okay. All right. So this will be really interesting to watch as we move forward. A different kind of game here, but it's like a fantasy style game. You go, you pick, and then you get to see the points. We'll let you know who ends up winning after this week, whether it comes from our socials or on Mike Murray's socials as well. You can take a look at his game as he continues to try and, tweak this out. And hopefully, eventually, we're going to get more and more people playing this fantasy game as we move forward and get people interested in the power rankings and seeing who makes the top 10. But yeah, I mean, this is really fun to go through and talk through everything from the first half of the season. I'm just so thrilled and excited that we have 3 episodes coming up in January. Obviously, things looked a little bit iffy there, but we are back and we are strong. So let's talk about what's happening here on the SNL Network this coming week. And I'll bring our schedule up on screen for anyone who's watching on our video version. So obviously tonight we had our By the Numbers show. This was a really fun show. Last week, if you missed it, we did trivia. And, maybe you're not the biggest trivia person or didn't get to watch it live. Don't worry. On the replay, you can go back and play along. Just go back to the beginning of the show and watch it play through. We had 2 really fun teams come in and play some trivia. We went through some really fun questions for that show. It was the 3rd time we did trivia, so go back and check that one out from this past week. Obviously, at the end of the year, we finished up with a host draft from our Superfan Takeover and our Best of show. This Wednesday, this will be SNL Stories. We have a planned guest for SNL Stories. Obviously, those things get a little bit iffy. You never know with certain, former alumni coming in if it's for sure going to happen. But the plan right now is to have a guest for SNL Stories. That show will be live just to our patrons for now. So we're going to, if you are a patron of the SNL Network, you can call in and get to watch that particular show and call and ask questions to our alumni. So that's a great perk of being an SNL Network patron. On a Thursday, Nicole, we have Hollywood Dish coming up. Can you tell the listeners what to expect from the 3rd edition of Hollywood Dish this Thursday?
Yes. First Hollywood Dish of 2022. We're so excited. Rebecca North and we are going to just talk pop culture. So everything that is in the news right now that is making headlines that you might expect to see referenced or impersonated or whatever whatever might happen on Saturday night on SNL and beyond. So we're going to have a lot of fun, lots to catch up on, a lot of big news. So it's going to be really fun, and we hope you join us on Thursday or whenever you want to listen to it.
Yes. And then on Saturday night, we have our first episode of 2022. Ariana DeBose and Roddy Ricch are coming into Saturday Night Live, and they are going to have so much fun with the cast. But if you know, maybe you can't get to watch the show. Who knows if there's going to be a live audience for Saturday Night Live, but you watch it on screen, and then you'll come into our live audience, into our, from your bedrooms, from your living rooms, late at night on Saturday to watch us break down the episode on the Hot Take shows. These are my favorite shows that we get to do. They're so much fun to get to interact with the live chat. So if you haven't, stayed up late, try it this week to join us and to break down everything we get to see from this first episode in 2022. And hopefully we'll get, a little bit of notice about what the new episodes will be, the 2 other ones after this particular episode. Okay. Mike, I know you put in so much effort into these shows, so I just really want to thank you for all the hard work that you do with your statistics. Can you tell the listeners where they can reach out to you and get to see everything that you're working on?
You can find me at SNL Mike Murray. I'll be on there on Saturday. I have a lot of stats for first-time hosts. So Ariana, her first time coming up, will if you have any ideas of what makes a good first-time host, then hit me up. I'll post the chat soon. And then I'm on Instagram at SNL Mike Murray. So I always have the latest power ranking as of that minute. So it's on the grid. Check it out. But also, hit me up. The hottest part about making the shows is that, find a new stat. So if people hit me up and they go, hey, I want to know what percentage Cecily Strong sings in this live sketch. I'm like, let's do it.
You got so Boston there. Did anyone else notice that? You got so Boston. We said the hardest part. They said the hottest part. I was like, yeah, like it is the hottest part. Yeah. Like it's so cool to find new stats.
Mike's so hot with all of the rankings that you produce.
So hot. Data is so hot.
Definitely. All right. That's the new byline for the By the Numbers show. Data so hot. Nicole, thank you for your contributions to the show as well. Where can the listeners reach out to you?
My pleasure. I like to tap into my inner nerd for this show because I also love data and I think data is hot. So I love to just remind myself of that every time we do this. You can find me at Nicole Rovine on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I've been very active lately because I'm really like knee deep in Succession. Every time I'm on, I say it's going to be over soon. It's not over. But I'm just really in that era, and I'm a good follow if you're really into Succession and SNL and other pop culture things. But just fair warning, there's a lot of that going on right now. And then at the SNL Network, obviously, we're doing a lot of great stuff. We did our the host draft podcast we did, and then it was really fun to be doing that on social media, and everyone was like commenting and debating, and it was just so much fun to be doing that on socials. So yeah, just keep up, look out for more of that kind of thing coming up.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of hot, I mean, this guy has a new Twitter profile pic for his SNLinReview account. So, Andy Hoglund, thanks for joining us. And where can listeners find you?
Of course, yeah. As Quentin Jaws says, it's you all know me, how I earn a living. SNLinReview. Hit me up on Twitter. Send me your thoughts. Entertainment Weekly. You guys want to check out those recaps? Want to tell you something hateful in the comments section? I live it. I love it. I learn off it. Everything. The recaps, they are typed in real time, so I'm often delirious. But I also try to include SNL alumni in the writings. I had Tom Schiller a couple weeks ago, Patrick Weathers. So if you guys want to know what's up with like Victoria Jackson or like Jeff Richards, we were just talking about Siobhan Fallon, check out those pieces. And
Absolutely.
Thanks for reading.
Yes, of course. Give him those clicks. He needs them.
Please, I need them.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, if you would like to see anything that we've got going on social media, as Nicole said, she does a great job over there. You can find us at the SNL Network on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, any of the socials to find us. You can subscribe to our podcast in 2022. If you want to give us the gift of a new year, subscribe to our pod at the SNL Network. Search for us on YouTube or on any podcatcher. And to speak to me directly at Jon Schneider 24. Don't be afraid to send me a DM. I'm always happy to talk about the show. I don't bite. Okay, everybody. We will see you later on in the week for a lot more coverage as we head towards the Ariana DeBose episode. Have a good one, everybody.